going to. She's already been shot at least 5 times. She's probably the only by the time everybody goes over there. He is armed with a 9mm. Who's got the 9mm? My brother Dave. I can't believe he did this.
It's a story as old as the Bible. Two brothers pitted against one another. David and Harold Beck were born and raised in the small town of Campbellsport, Wisconsin. Dave and Harry, as they were known, were first responders, firefighters. But on a frigid Wisconsin night in January 2001, they would find themselves standing over the dead body of a woman. She was on the floor of the fire station where they both worked. Was it a lover's quarrel or a twisted tale of brotherly love?
Campbellsport is northwest of Milwaukee. It's a beautiful area, rolling hills, kind of a quintessential small town, America's small town, Wisconsin.
Dave was just a guy that we lived with. My mom and dad had been going through a divorce at that time, and Mom couldn't afford a place yet that we could go on our own. And he offered for Mom to stay with him for a little while. She took him up on that offer.
This is the guy that Kim chose to move in with when she left me and took the kids to his house. So I didn't know him any more than barely knowing his name and where he lived.
We didn't really spend a lot of time with Dave. He was kind of demanding of my mom's time, and I think unconsciously we avoided him.
Dave didn't handle the news that we were moving out very well.
After that, we started receiving threatening phone calls.
I had a couple of hints that something had gone wrong. My mom left to go to the fire department because Harry, Dave's brother, had called and said, hey, you know, Dave's freaking out. We need you to come talk about your relationship again. So Mom said that she was gonna go to the fire department to talk to Harry.
So Mom did her quick, I'll be back in a little bit. I'm just gonna go meet Harry. Gave us a quick kiss. I'll see you guys in a little while.
It happened on a Saturday, and I was paged, called in. I was assigned to go to the local hospital emergency room because we had a gunshot victim there.
I happened to be at one end of town at a bar, having some dinner and shooting some pool with my friends. We noticed the news on the TV said that in our little town there had been a shooting at the fire department. Of course, my mind right away jumped to could it be Kim, but I discounted it immediately because they referred to her as being married. So I wasn't concerned.
While I was at the hospital, I eventually got paged and called away by my lieutenant to come to the building because the shooter had been arrested.
When a case like this happens, it tends to dominate the local press because homicides are not happening that often in a city the size of Campbellsport.
Mr. Storm, behalf of the state.
Ladies and gentlemen, again, good afternoon. As the judge just indicated, this is a chance for me to give a statement to you outlining what it is we expect to prove.
My name is Tom Storm. I was the district attorney in Fond du Lac County at the time of the prosecution of this trial.
You'll hear that on that Saturday evening, about 6:30, Kim Passwaters came and met Harry Beck at the Campbellsport Fire Department. During the course of the conversation that Harry had with Kim Passwaters, something set the defendant off, and you'll hear in the testimony that comes forward that David Beck charged down a stairway, discharged a weapon 6 times, firing at Kim Passwaters, and that she died.
The evidence is that, in this case, is going to show a feeble, depressed, suicidal mind. On January 6th, Dave says, Harry, you got to help me. I got to know what to do here. I'm going to kill myself. He says, one of us are going to die.
I knew the night my mom died when I wanted to see her. that I wanted to be at the trial. I wanted to face him. I wanted to face Dave.
It just wouldn't be right to try to get closure out of this whole thing without going through a trial process.
I just really want to know what happened. But I mean, like when the coroner comes in and stuff, I don't think I'll be able to handle that. But some things I think I really need to know.
The undersigned would be David, Beck, B-E-C-K, is giving this statement to Detective Bill Flood.
My lieutenant and I, we had conducted the interview.
Can you tell us what you observed about his demeanor?
When I first met him, I asked him if he was okay. He said that he was, and I asked him to take a seat in the interview room and that we would be with him in a few minutes. When we started out, I had indicated to him that there's two sides to every story, and we're interested in hearing those, especially your side. And he said, well, it's a long story. And I said, we're all ears.
I told my brother Harold, and I basically asked him to ask her to try to find out if I had done something and what it was, or what her side of this story and this situation was about. And he said that he'd call her and find out.
He called Kim. Kim agreed, and they met at the firehouse.
You armed yourself and you went over to the fire station. Then what did you do? Was anybody there?
No.
Where did you go then?
I proceeded to go up above. There's a second level to the apparatus bay, and I went up there.
And you sat up there just waiting for them to come?
Yep.
Harold was asking Kim the nature of the relationship and where David stood. And she basically had communicated to Harold that she just wanted to be friends.
And that's when Harry interrupted her and said, are you having sex with him? And she flat out said yes. And then Harry asked her, if you just want to be friends, where does the sex come in? She had made the comment, well, he wouldn't allow it to go that way. He had to have sex. And
at that point, you were listening to her talk about your relationship, and she was describing it in different terms than what you...
Yes.
Did you feel like she was not telling the truth to Harry?
Correct. Because she wanted to win him over to make me look bad.
And how did that make you feel?
Just when I lost it.
It's actually not uncommon, I think, that people in emotional situations like this, particularly domestic incidents, that they want to unburden themselves.
All I remember is I was leaning over, and I didn't like what I was hearing, and I didn't want to hear no more, and I got up, and I just walked right around, came down the steps. She just kind of looked toward me, and I pulled the gun out and just proceeded to fire.
My recollection is that he was relatively unemotional, but I have to say that I was very elated that those words came out of his mouth. I believe toward the end of the interview, he was somewhat relieved. A lot of people do, and that's why they confess, because inherently they want to relieve or unburden themselves with something so highly emotional and volatile.
I thought it was a very inculpatory, incriminatory statement by the defendant, which really formed a strong foundation for the case.
Do you have any idea how many shots you fired?
I have no idea.
I noticed that the gun was being held by my brother David as he was advancing towards her at a quick pace.
Dave and Harry Beck grew up together, raced cars together, and lived within walking distance of each other. But on this day, in a courtroom, Harry Beck would take the stand against his own brother, accusing him of murder. The murder of the woman they both knew, Kim Passwaters, a mother of 4 who was left for dead.
What's in there? $5.
I loved my mom very much, and I know that she loved me and my sisters. We were basically her whole world.
There's Missy. There's Heather. There's Noelle. There's Squeaky. Did you like your ride on the bus? Yeah. You did? What's this?
Mom, can I have this necklace?
Oh,
Mom,
Kimberly
what's this?
Passwaters,
What's this?
16.
My mom was extremely friendly. She wanted to do everything for everyone.
I see you. I knew you were back there. Did you wake up?
Yeah.
Yes, you did.
Oh, she was the most loving, caring, energetic, helpful, kind of a mom that anybody could be.
State, call its next witness, please.
Call Harry Beck.
Harry was a person that we spent a lot of time with. He was our friend's dad. He would take us to the racetrack and play games with us. He was joking around with us all the time. To have him involved was painful.
Mr. Beck, are you familiar with David Beck?
Yes, I am.
And how do you know him?
He is my younger brother.
I am thankful for the fact that he did stand up and be a great man in testifying against his own brother.
You were with David on the evening of January 6th of 2001, were you not?
Yes, I was.
Could you tell me how it is that you came to see him that evening?
He called me. He was upset. Said he couldn't take it anymore. He says he's had enough of the mind games. I asked him what he meant by mind games. He says, well, she's calling me. She wants to see me. Then she doesn't want to see me. And I says, who are you talking about? And he says, Kim.
Domestic violence murders are not all that uncommon, but they're shocking for communities. And, you know, and they also, I think, have a real sense of heartache for people because you can see how, gosh, brothers being involved in this horrific scene. And then, of course, the homicide itself is just terrible.
He said he was going to kill Kim and kill himself. I says, well, nobody is really worth that drastic of a move. I said, well, what do you want me to do? And he said, talk to her. I says, well, I'll call her and ask her if she wants to talk. And he said, fine. He goes, make it tonight. And he says, well, talk to her at the firehouse.
Harold said at one point to me that he was kind of surprised to see David show up there. But in a statement taken by other detectives, he had indicated to them that he was supposed to call David. And so Harold called David, told him where and when they were going to meet. And he was aware that he was going to come and simply eavesdrop.
I sat there, I'd say it was approximately 5 to 8 minutes when I heard the door open from the meeting room and my brother came running through, ran behind me and ran up the stairs. And as he ran by me, he said, she's here.
Did you know your brother was in the building?
No.
David went upstairs in the loft where some of the equipment is. He concealed himself, and Kim Passwaters eventually got there.
Did you talk to Kim Passwaters then?
I started to. I said, well, it's none of my business. I said, but I'd like to know because it's my brother David. He says that she's calling him, and then she wants to be with him, and then she doesn't want to be with him. She wants to be with him, doesn't want to be with him. And she says that she didn't think there was anything wrong there. I says, well, I would look at that as a yo-yo relationship. And you're treating them like a yo-yo. You're throwing them out, you're bringing them back, and you're throwing them out. And she said she didn't look at it like that. And I asked her if she's been having sex with my brother, and she said yes, on and off. I asked her, how do you feel towards Dave? And she goes, I don't want to hurt him. And that's when I heard footsteps coming down the stairs at a quick pace.
What happened after you heard the footsteps coming down the stairs?
I slowly started to turn to my right. And as I turned to my right, I looked at Kim, and I saw fear in her face. Then I proceeded to turn around more quickly, and that's when I noticed a handgun, and then it went off.
That was too much for David to bear. And he came down those steps fast and drew a weapon and began shooting.
Did you see it go off once or more than once, or what?
After it went off the first time, I saw it go off multiple times after that. And while I was watching the gun go off, I seen Kim put her arms up in a defensive cross position in front of her to try to block the bullets. And I noticed that the gun was being held by my brother David as he was advancing towards her at a quick pace.
What happened then?
He brought the gun from pointing at Kim on the floor. He brought the gun up and bared down on me.
I think he was as traumatized by the event as we were. He did not expect Dave to come out shooting. He also alluded to the fact of how jealous Dave was and had become. Because he's like, I know I can't have Kim over at my house to talk. I know I can't go over to her house to talk. So he chose the fire department as a neutral place where they could both talk and Dave wouldn't freak out about it.
He leaned over and he says, "Now it hurts, don't it, Kim?"
Harold had told me that he felt he would be shot any moment. And eventually, David lowered the weapon.
He goes, "What should I do?" I told him to leave. Just leave. Because the only way that I knew that I was going to get out of there is for him to leave, and then I can leave and call.
Should Harold have thought better of allowing this thing to take place with David eavesdropping? You can argue that either way.
And as soon as he disappeared underneath the stairs, I bolted for the door, went out the door, and started running across the street to my house.
Harold ran out of the firehouse as he lived like a half a block away, and he immediately went and called police.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would like to play a 911 tape.
911. This is Harry Beck with the Hills for Firefighter. I live directly across the street. I want you to dispatch officers down to the Campbell Fire Department at once. There's been a lady shot several times. She's been shot at least 5 times. Can you tell if she's conscious or? She was unconscious when I left her. Okay. She's probably DOA by the time everybody goes over there. He is armed with a 9mm. Who set the 9mm? My brother Dave. Is he a member of the fire department? Yes, he is. If I knew he was setting her up like this, that's what I feel right now. Is he was using me to set her up. Yeah. I can't believe he did this.
I didn't have a very strong relationship with my dad at the time. My mom was my rock. My mom was my best friend.
Today is the 19th, August 19th, 1996.
I love you, Mom.
I love you too.
I remember that a couple of our family members had shown up that night, and they said that they were at the hospital, and they had seen my mom. And she begged them not to let us see her that way.
Harry came up and he pushed me back with his left hand. He was firing the weapon as he was going down the stairs.
David Beck threw his brother Harry Beck under the bus.
The jury heard Dave Beck, in his own words, confess to the murder of Kim Passwaters. But those words were on an audio tape, and it is a much different story when the defendant himself, Dave Beck, gets on the stand, looks the jury right in the eye, and says, "I didn't do it." As an EMT, Dave Beck's job was to save lives, but now it was his own life that was on the line.
I had gotten a call from my younger sister's friend from school, and she said, "I don't know if I should tell you this because I think I might get in trouble, but my Uncle Dave just shot your mom 6 times. She was crying on the phone, so I knew that it was serious. So then her mom got on the phone and said that Harry was talking to the police and that Dave had a gun, and they didn't know where he was, so we were supposed to stay inside and lock the doors.
My instant reaction was to be scared and to want my mom.
I went home and found a very unnerving voicemail on my phone. It was my children crying in practical agony about their fear, because they fairly well knew what had happened already. Their mother had been shot, who the shooter was, and they were terribly afraid that he was coming after them.
Defense ready to call its next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Defense calls Dave Beck.
David Beck recanted his confession later in the process.
Good morning.
Morning.
Would you please state your full name and spell your last name?
David Beck, B-E-C-K.
When he initially recanted, it became pretty clear to us that he probably would have to testify, although that's never a guarantee.
Defense attorneys and their clients will have that discussion late in the trial to say, what do you want to do? Typically, the advice from the defense attorney is do not take the stand.
I went in the fire station. I used the phone. And I called my brother Harry. And I said, one of us has to die. And Harry goes, you don't need to go to that drastic step. He goes, what's going on? I said, well, it's between me and Kim. I don't know what's going on. She's doing 180s. I feel like a yo-yo. He goes, if you want, I'll call her up. I'll ask her to talk to me. And I said, well, she ain't taking my phone calls. And that's when I decided that I was going to commit suicide in front of her. So I got my jacket on. I grabbed a 9mm off the table, placed it in my waistband, and I proceeded out of my house and down to the fire station.
I just remember wondering why. Like, that was the biggest question in my mind. Why did he do this? He obviously didn't take into account how it affected me and my sister's lives, because it affected us greatly in a horrible way.
What happened next?
I saw Harry come out of his house, and he proceeded to head toward the fire station. He stopped, I stopped. I looked at him. He looked at me, and he goes like this, and he holds his hand out. I just looked at him, and I opened up my jacket, and I took the gun, my 9mm out of my waistband, and I placed it in his hand.
David Beck threw his brother Harry Beck under the bus by asserting that he was the one who actually fired the shots that killed Kimberly Passwaters. That was inconsistent with what we know about the motive, certainly, of the two gentlemen that were involved, and it was inconsistent with the physical evidence that we were able to pull together during the course of the trial.
Harry came up and he pushed me back with his left hand, which took me back toward the railing. I then heard a gunshot. I caught my balance and I proceeded to try to see what was going on. And as I turned to go down the stairs, he was firing the weapon as he was going down the stairs. I tried to catch up. I got near the bottom. I screamed, stop. And at that point, I reached and I grabbed his upper arm. That's when I heard the final shot go off. His arm came down. I ran my hand down his arm to where the gun was. He released the gun into my hand. I looked at Kim, and Kim was laying on the floor on her left side in a fetal position.
When you think about how the scenario played out in this case, confessing, then recanting, then taking the stand, then implicating your brother, imagining what would it take to get to the point that somebody would make that allegation on the stand against, somebody that is, their family member.
You made those statements on that tape?
Yes, I did.
Why did you accept responsibility for this?
I accepted responsibility for it because I wanted to protect Harry because he had a family to take care of. He had a wife and 3 kids. I am not married and I don't have any kids.
I was made aware of the idea that if the two brothers would point fingers at each other, being as they were both, witnesses to the crime, that it could result. I mean, there seemed to be the possibility that the jury could have a hard time coming out with a verdict against Dave.
You said you were going to take the blame for Harry because he has a family, he's got the 3 kids and his wife. When did you decide you were going to accuse Harry?
Could you repeat that, please?
When did you decide you were going to accuse Harry? He still has the same wife and family, does he not?
when the defense attorney is asking questions, you know, the defendant knows what it's going to be, and he or she can you know, sort of spin their version of events out there. But then you are under a cross-examination from the prosecutor, and prosecutors are looking forward to this opportunity to really grill, you know, a defendant.
Over the time of my incarceration here, I would repeat to my family members that I did not do it. And they would start asking me questions. And then finally in July, my sister Joyce drove out here with her husband from Arizona. She looked at me and she started crying and she says, I know you didn't do it, and you should not try to protect somebody who committed murder.
Do you have an opinion as to the reputation for truthfulness and honesty that Harry has?
Between the two of them, David is more honest than Harold is.
With the defense resting after Dave accused his brother Harry of killing Kim Passwaters, the prosecution calls Harry Beck back to the stand, only this time to defend himself in what's turned into a case of he said, he said.
Did he ever discuss with you when he was going to plead not guilty to the charge?
Yes, I visited him. He told me he was going to plead not guilty. I said, well, what do you mean you're going to plead not guilty? And he said, because I didn't kill her. I says, what do you mean you didn't kill her? He said, the ambulance crew killed her. I says, how did the ambulance crew kill her? He said, because the ambulance crew didn't do enough to save her.
Harold Beck, I believe he was probably duped in this. He was played by his brother. And then he found himself being thrown under the bus during the trial.
When did you find out that David was accusing you of shooting Kim Passwaters?
I think it was about a couple days later.
I was never concerned that Harry was the one that killed my mom. That was never something that crossed my mind. I had heard that Dave confessed when the cops found him. Plus, he was the one who was dating Mom. He was the one who was becoming erratic. He was the one who was making everybody else around him feel uncomfortable and being possessive of my mom.
He did tell you he didn't kill her, didn't he?
No.
He didn't?
No.
He told you he didn't kill her, and he said that in an accusatory way, didn't he?
No.
Well, do you remember a meeting? Did he say he didn't kill her that the ambulance crew did?
Yes.
So he said he didn't kill her?
Yes.
Right? When did you tell the police about these statements?
After I found out Dave was accusing me.
Is that right?
Yes.
You know you did this. We all know you did this. You confessed to doing it, and now you're turning around and trying to blame your brother for it? That was just a scapegoat move.
Did you grow up with Dave and Harold?
Yes, I pretty much helped raise him.
Some of the family members did testify regarding the truthfulness of both David Beck and Harry Beck, and actually compared their relative credibilities.
Do you have an opinion as his reputation for truthfulness and honesty?
For who? For who?
For Harold.
Yes.
And what is that opinion? Is he truthful and honest?
Harold, no.
Okay. Do you have an opinion as to David Beck's reputation for truthfulness and honesty?
Yes.
What is that opinion?
David is very truthful, he's honest, and he will go all out for you.
Okay.
Some of the family members testified that David was more trustworthy. But one of the things we pointed out to them during the course of the trial was that David Beck, by definition, lied at one point in the proceedings. At one point, he said he did it. At another point, he said that his brother did it. They can't both be true.
You state that Harold Beck and David Beck are your sons?
Yes.
You've raised these children?
Yes.
You've known them since they were in diapers?
Since I gave birth to him.
Do you have an opinion as to the reputation for truthfulness and honesty that Harry has?
Between the two of them, David is more honest than Harold is. Harold is a dreamer. He likes to pretend.
You read the police reports, including the statements of Harold Beck in this case, right?
Yes, I did.
And did you determine how far he was when he says that Dave Beck fired the handgun?
Yes.
Okay.
Harold Beck places himself at a point just off of the line of fire, approximately 5 to 6 feet from the muzzle of the weapon.
Okay.
Taking his statement as a position of the various people in the room, one or more of the bullets would have passed right over his right shoulder.
Okay. And based on that observation, is it likely there would have been gunshot residue on his person?
It would be very likely that there would be gunshot residue on the back surface of his clothing, possibly the back of his neck, maybe even the extreme right rear of his face, around his ear.
And do you have an opinion as to whether or not that those areas you described and that clothing you described should have been tested in this case?
Yes, they should have been tested.
I wish we would have had that type of evidence, but it simply wasn't available. But that gave me some pause.
One test. Harry, as you described it, can we have your jacket, sir? Bubble, bubble. Let's test it. We do that, then we seal the deal. It's done.
Three people enter a firehouse, only 2 walk out alive. Those 2 happen to be brothers, Harry Beck, who had called the police immediately, and Dave Beck, who fled still holding a gun. It seems like an open and shut case, right? Not exactly.
At this time, then, ladies and gentlemen, the attorneys will have the opportunity to make what is known as closing arguments. Prosecution will argue first.
In closing arguments, we wanted to establish that there was method, that David Beck had access to possession of a firearm that caused the death of Kimberly Passwaters. He had opportunity to commit that crime. We know he was present there because he told us that. And we know David Beck had motive.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen, David Beck is guilty of the first-degree intentional homicide of Kimberly Passwaters, and he's guilty of recklessly endangering the safety of his brother, Harry Beck. You should convict him on both counts.
So those were the 3 things I was most concerned about: method, opportunity, and motive. And of those, motive was the strongest one, and I think the most persuasive part of the trial.
6 bullets. We aren't talking about a single bullet. We're not talking about some sort of accident. We are talking about 6 shots at point-blank range from somebody who lost it. Ladies and gentlemen, that's personal. That's not Harry Beck shooting a gun. That's David Beck, who had the motive to do so. This is serious business. This is not kid stuff. The defendant's telling you a fairy tale. Don't buy it. Take your obligation seriously, as I know you will. Consider all the evidence, and I'd ask you to do your obligation as jurors, and I think that is to review the evidence, come to an appropriate conclusion, which I think supports the guilt of the defendant beyond a reasonable doubt.
I don't know if they thought I knew what I was talking about, or if they thought Alex Flynn knew what he was talking about. I simply don't know what the jury's thinking at that point.
Nobody looked at Harry critically. So, now, I look at Harry critically, and you look at Harry critically. We are the first ones to look at what's going on with Harry. Then we look at what else did the police not do in this case. One test would have answered this. One test. Harry, as you described it, can we have your jacket, sir? Bubble, bubble. Let's test it. We do that, then we seal the deal. It's done. Harry's got the gunpowder all over his jacket and his back as he's turning consistent. Verifies forensic, independent, objective, corroborating evidence. Case is over. Let's go home.
We had no reason to believe, after we had got done with probably a week to 2 weeks of follow-up, and several contacts with Harold to include a formal statement and things like that, that he was involved.
Nobody ever looked at him as a suspect. He had the motive, opportunity, and ability to commit this. The motive, I don't know what it was. I can't tell you what it was. But the motive was the shame on the family name for a suicidal brother walking around. Could be. He had the ability. He knows how to shoot a gun. And he had the opportunity. He was there. His sister and his mother came in here and testified that Harry has a reputation for untruthfulness. And they know it. And Dave has a reputation for truthfulness. And they know it. This all raises a reasonable doubt.
I felt like anybody with a brain could see through the story that Dave and his lawyer were telling. But right before they released the verdict, I got a little nervous. There was a little bit of doubt there.
As to count one, verdict reads, "We, the jury, find the defendant, David Beck."
All witnesses have been called, including 5 members of the Beck family, 3 for the defense and 2 for the prosecution. But there was another family involved. The 4 Passwaters girls and their father, Doug, were in the courtroom every single day, and they were about to find out the fate of the man accused of killing their mother.
Members of the jury, at this time, the court will now instruct you upon the principles of law which you are to follow in considering the evidence and in reaching your verdict.
I dealt with Doug Passwaters during the course of the trial, and he was there during the entire trial with his daughters. My perception and my understanding was that he was strong for them, he was there for them, and he was one of the reasons I think that the 4 girls appeared to be as well-grounded as they were.
I think my sisters and I wanted to attend the trial because we wanted to be a part of it. I personally was 15. I felt like I was old enough to know what was going on. We wanted to know what was going on with Dave, what sort of things he was saying, what sort of stuff actually happened to our mom.
I wanted to see my mom get justice, and I wanted to see the process of it.
I think the fact that the 4 girls were present sent a message to the jury that must have had some sort of impact. I don't know how to quantify that, but I have to believe that it had some impact.
All right, bring the jury in, please.
I'm always concerned when a jury is out. I never predict how long it takes them. I think jurors, by their nature, and this jury in particular, take their responsibilities very conscientiously.
Has the jury arrived at a verdict? Mr. Pickert, would you deliver the verdict to Mr. Neville, the bailiff, please? And will the bailiff present the verdict to the court?
I don't get into the business of how long will it take a jury. I just want them to give it their sincere, conscientious consideration and come to a fair verdict.
As to count one, verdict reads, "We, the jury, find the defendant, David Beck, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide as charged in the first count of the information."
I was probably 90% sure that they'd come back with a guilty verdict.
Relief. Relief was a big emotion when they came out with that verdict.
We were so grateful that to the prosecution team and the jury for being able to see their way clear to a proper vision of the events as they did actually unfold.
It can be difficult for 12 people to come to a decision and agreement that the sun comes up in the east. So when we go through a trial with complicated evidence, things to be considered, and we get 12 people to agree unanimously, as they did in this case, that David Beck was guilty of the charges that we had placed before them, I'm pleased with that result.
The court will accept the verdict, and at this time, I would discharge the jury Mr. Beck will be remanded into the custody of the Fond du Lac County Sheriff's Department at this time.
I think what was more relief was hearing what the sentence would be, because this was a man who had hurt us as deep as he could, and I felt like he was dangerous. The judge said that Dave seemed very unremorseful during the trial. He had a chance to speak, and he chose not to. He didn't even look at us once when we were in court. All I ever saw was the back of his head. So I was happy that the judge saw that and recognized that, and he sentenced him to life without parole.
I think Dave got what he deserved, and I thought it was just horrible, the whole family situation that they were going through, brother pointing finger at brother. I think the right guy got it in the end.
How rough was it for you and your entire family to sit through this trial and hear the things that you heard?
It was pretty tough, and it was hard for our family. It was.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. I felt Harry's life had been torn apart just as much as ours had. I never once thought that he was a part of it.
From here, it's still a healing process. You know, there's a lot of things to get through, a lot of things to talk about, a lot of emotions that haven't yet been released and still need to be discussed and spent.
We were given custody back to Dad, and he started to become the father that we needed him to be. He had to fight for us in court. He needed to be there for us, and the relationship started to grow. So I got a second chance at a relationship with my dad because of it.
I am just a few weeks away from having my first baby, and we're going to have a girl, because girls run in my family. My mom would go crazy over her grandkids. I know it.
The challenge of raising my 4 daughters alone was made infinitely easier based on the fact that Kim had been such a great parent.
I know that my tears might seem like sad tears, and sometimes they are. But I am really happy with my life. I'm really happy with where I've ended up and how my future is looking. My mom was a big part of forming that. And it's important to me that people view her as a person, as a woman who had the greatest love for life and for her family.
David Beck has been in prison for close to 20 years now. Kim's 4 daughters, who ranged in age from 8 to 15 at the time, are all reportedly doing well. One of them, who will keep anonymous, reached out to Dave Beck at the prison, but he refused to see her. Kim would have been 54 years old today, a grandmother of 6, with the latest child born just after our interview took place. Heather, Kim's youngest, had a healthy baby girl. I'm Ashley Banfield. Thanks for watching.